Superman 3 is generally regarded as a huge letdown by many Superman fans, and is often heavily criticised for his attempts at introducing comedy to the series. With the casting of comic legend Richard Pryor, the writers went with a comedy approach, which isn't a huge problem, but the main factor was that it wasn't really funny. Even with the average reviews, the film was very successful on release and made a killing on rentals when it arrived on VHS. This was the first Superman film I remember watching. I recall my parents taping it for me, so being my first Superman film, I will always have a soft spot for it. As you grow up, you notice more of the bad comedy, and you can clearly see the errors they made in changing the direction of Superman. Richard Lester, who is recognised as one of the most influential directors, especially by Steven Soderbergh, took on the role of director again. Richard Lester, before Superman, was well known for the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night and the Musketeer films. To be honest, Mr. Lester didn't care much about Superman and only did the film for the money, but that doesn't mean he's not a professional and talented because the film is a well-made product. All of the departments of the production made great efforts. The visual style of the film is gorgeous and the photography really stands out, and the film was praised on release for having fantastic special effects. As with all the Alexander Salkind produced films, they never made films on the cheap. The problem I had with them was their reliance on the Newmans for their scripts. Their work was always a mixed bag. Everyone on the internet has pointed out the film's bad points, but there are many good points to the film. The film's subplot involving Clark returning to Smallville and rekindling his love for Lana Lang. The scenes with Chris and Annette O'Toole are beautifully directed, and their great chemistry on screen really shines. But it's just a shame he doesn't end up with her in the end, because Lana loves him for being Clark Kent and not Superman. The other selling point of the film is Superman turning evil from a synthetic piece of kryptonite. The battle between Clark and Superman is a fan favourite, and one of the highlights of the film. The scene is well directed and staged for the time, but looking at it now, it's a bit slow paced and a bit clunky in places, but it's 1983 and you've got to give it credit for being original. If you look carefully in the background, you can see the 007 soundstage at Pinewood. A lot of the comedy in the film doesn't work and just falls flat, but there are, I must admit, some scenes I did find funny.
Green stuff. And, hey, pate. Boy, this pate is really unusual.
I didn't make any. Oh, Clark, that's Buster's dog food.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mouths closed, ears open.
The big pig!
Every oil pump in America is run by...
Computers, I know! Mr. Webster, I did not... Mr. Webster.
Mr. August Gorman?
Sir, August Gorman here. Listen, I know that you're a man of compassion and you have pity, and I don't want to go to jail because they have robbers and rapists who rape robbers. Oh, no. No more. Look. You sit. 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 Help! No! You two jackass!
Christopher Reeve is in top form. His best performance, I feel, of all the Superman movies. He is so comfortable now in the role, and having done a few other films after the first Superman, he has a very confident presence on screen. Richard Pryor is okay in the film, and I don't think he got bad reviews on his performance. He just had little to work with, and when it came to the comedic scenes, he sticks close to the script and doesn't show much improv to add more humour. In regards to the special effects, the film has a great mix of miniatures, front projection and matte paintings. This was the last film to use the Zoptic system for the flying effects before they changed the process for Supergirl and Santa Claus the Movie. The film often uses blue screen, where they should have used front projection for the flying shots, so I was a little disappointed by that. There's quite a bit of action to the film, but the problem is, it's not frequent enough. The editing in the film is a bit slow paced and doesn't have the flair of other action films at the time. The first Superman film, the editing was very quick and tight on the action scenes, but with Lester's films, the pacing is a little more traditional. The film's tone has been discussed a lot. It goes from comedy to a dark action film. With the introduction of evil Superman, the tone changes very quickly. Many scenes upset kids at the time, one being the transformation of Vera into the cyborg. The choice to have no music but just having her screaming really adds to the horror of what's happening. Even for me and my friends, when we were kids, it scared us.
Girls!
Sis?
Oh, my God. What is that?
Another interesting part of the film is the computer game sequence programmed by Atari. The cost of this sequence was very expensive, costing around $95,000 to produce and took over 4 months of work to finish. Many people thought at the time the game was actually from an Atari 5200, but alas no. The home computers of the day couldn't compete with graphics like these. To be honest, the quality of the graphics resemble more of a late 80s arcade machine. The music for the film is really good. Ken Thorne, the composer from Superman 2, returns to rearrange John Williams' music, but also adds more of his own work this time. With the third film, Ken Thorne throws in more synth compositions, with many composers starting to incorporate keyboards into their scores like Joe Goldsmith and John Carpenter. So Ken followed suit and does a fine job underlying the darker themes with a deep synth percussion. Ken Thorne was often criticised for his work on the sequels, with fans complaining about the quality of the music sounding too thin and flat. Thankfully, that was down to poor mixing at the time, and the music has been remastered recently on CD, and the Blu-ray release should put the negative opinions to rest. Reorchestrating an existing piece of music over a new film is very tough, and you can't just copy and paste music over a scene, which was done for the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it rarely works. So you have to appreciate the efforts made by Ken to fit John Williams' music over a new scene and make it work on an action and emotional level. Siskel and Ebert's review of Superman 3 highlights some similar points that I had made, but both agree the film is disappointing all round.
And a lot of Superman 3 is fun, but this movie is more simple-minded than the other 2 Superman films. It all but ignores Superman's dual identity as Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent, and that was always fun in the first 2 films, that contrast between these 2 different kinds of characters. In this movie, gives Superman a little love interest with Annette O'Toole, but oddly enough, their love affair is pretty standard. It could happen between any 2 people. It doesn't depend upon the fact that Clark Kent is Superman. Superman 3 doesn't have the human touch of the first 2 movies. Doesn't have the interest in what a person would be like if he were invincible or nearly invincible. And Superman 3, well, it's well made, it's entertaining, but it's got too many stunts and it's just not quite special.
I liked it even less than you did. It does something I didn't think a Superman movie could ever do for me, and that is bore me. This movie is missing a great love affair. That's what the first 2 pictures had. Interesting love affairs, Clark and Lois, Superman and Lois. Marvelous stuff. Here, just that little love story with Lana Lang and the hometown girl and Clark, and that should have been the back half of the movie. Instead, as you say, more stunts. Richard Pryor, wasted here. He's a goody-goody guy, not real evil.
I was disappointed. I think that Richard Pryor is always best in the movies when he's anarchic, when he's an enemy of the establishment, when he's an outsider, stirring things up. And here, he's a nice little guy. You pat him on the head. He's a schmo. He's Superman's pal. Don't drop me, Superman. He's too nice in this movie. He ought to get in there and really mess things up.
Ever since his accident, he's been playing nicer and nicer guys. I want him to be real, real evil.
If you are a fan of superhero movies, this film should be in your collection. I think the good points just outweigh the bad. It is an entertaining film, and it's good to have on in the background or to watch while enjoying a few beers. Actually, watch it while you're drunk. It'll make it far more entertaining, so I recommend doing that. Superman 3 is a one-off adventure for Superman. It doesn't link itself to the previous films. Treat it like a James Bond film. It stands on its own.
Take care. I'll see you around. So long.
Take it easy, man.
Let the games begin.